bitten by a cobra or any member of its extended family of other snakes, several things can happen. You might stumble about while seeking help, and then your diaphragm might slowly become paralyzed, causing you to begin to suffocate. You may have violent convulsions, not be able to swallow, go blind, completely lose control of your limbs, your heart rate will slowly drop, and if untreated with anti-venom, a full-grown man might die within 15 to 30 minutes, depending on the size of the snake and the amount of venom injected. If you live, there is a good chance you will suffer partial paralysis for a good while, or perhaps permanently, or the venom might cause gangrene and require an amputation to prevent death. In India alone, an estimated 50,000 plus people die from snakebite every year. A study cited by the World Health Organization estimates that between 2000 and 2019, 1 million Indians died from snakebite. Now, imagine if instead of being jailed or fined for a crime you committed, your sentence was to be thrown into a pit of snakes, or have cobras dumped on you in a confined space. Sound like a horror movie punishment? Yes, it does. But during the Mughal Empire in India, death by snakebite was a relatively common punishment. Please continue to watch if you'd like to hear more about the maybe not so unusual punishments of the powerful Mughal Empire. And if you like what you see and hear, please subscribe to our channel for more dark and unusual topics. The Mughal Empire was a Muslim kingdom that spread out of the southern area of today's Uzbekistan in the early 1500s. Within a relatively short time, the Mughals, under their first emperor Babur, had expanded to include present-day Afghanistan, Kashmir, and most of modern Pakistan, as well as the area around the Indian city of Delhi, down the Ganges to the border of what is now Bangladesh. Over the next 180 years, the empire grew to encompass most of the Indian subcontinent, except the far south and much of modern Pakistan and Bangladesh. Its three greatest conquerors were Babur, who reigned from 1526 to 1530, Akbar from 1556 to 1605, and Aurangzeb from 1658 to 1707. However, most people today, especially outside of India, recall only the Emperor Shihab al-Din Muhammad Khurram, better known as Shah Jahan, ruler of the world, who reigned from 1628 to 1658, and who is best known for having built the world-famous Taj Mahal, the elaborate tomb for his wife Mumtaz Mahal, and which gathers an incredible 60 million visitors each year. Each Mughal emperor, and there were 21 of them from 1526 to 1857, was unique in their accomplishments or lack thereof. But generally speaking, the Mughal court was known for not only its military accomplishments, but its culture and arts, including the aforementioned skill in architecture, poetry, decorative arts, and much else. All Mughal emperors were Muslim. Some were quite orthodox and intolerant of other religions, such as that of the majority Hindus in their empire, as well as the Sikhs of northern India and others. Others attempted to construct an empire that was, at least for the time, tolerant of other belief systems. One Mughal emperor, Akbar, attempted to unite all the religions of his empire in a new set of beliefs called Din-il-Ilahi, which combined elements of all the major beliefs of his domain. Though this, as you can likely deduce for yourself, ultimately failed. One thing the Mughals were not tolerant of was crime. There were four main categories of crime in the empire. First, there was the category called Hadd, crimes against the tenets of Islam, as encoded or traditionalized in Sharia law. These offenses included apostasy, rejecting Islam for another religion, theft, adultery, prostitution, drunkenness, insulting the emperor or other high government official, and other offenses. The second was Tazir, which encompassed all crimes not covered under Hadd and included actions such as assault, gambling, minor theft, whose definition was likely left to local judges, and offenses against God, which might include using profanity to describe the deity, defacing religious texts or buildings, etc. Third were the categories called Qisas and Diya. Qisas means retaliation, and Diya, blood money. As you might have already deduced from the definitions, Qisas meant that a victim or his or her family might be allowed to inflict a similar injury as that sustained in a crime, like highway robbery, a common offense, or physical attack. The literal translation of Qisas is life for life and limb for limb. Qisas also allowed the victim or their family to forgive a crime, but very often when physical punishment was not inflicted, Diya, or blood money, was paid to compensate the victim or their families. Whilst the Mughals did have troops that policed areas assigned to them and did have an elaborate system of courts and judgment, many criminals and gangs operated with relative impunity, especially in the latter part of the empire, when outside invasions, corruption, and economic decline contributed to widespread crime. However, if you were caught and judged guilty, very often a rapid process, you could expect a brutal punishment unless you were fortunate enough to be able and allowed to pay diya. So, what were the punishments during the Mughal Empire? Something quite painful, you can be assured. As you may know, in certain Muslim countries today, theft is sometimes punished by the lopping off of the right hand, to be followed by the left and other limbs for subsequent offenses. One account from Mughal times recounts a thief who had lost his right hand, then arm, then a leg, before breaking into someone's house in the middle of the night. He must have been quite skilled, at least to a degree, and was finally killed by the owner. Most penalties under Tazir were prescribed, written as law, but in many cases, or if a local official was particularly powerful or lived in a remote region, he, and it was always a man, could get very inventive and could include death if that just happened to occur. Wink wink. This could mean, and often did, that a criminal could have his tongue cut out. It could also mean he was impaled, and this impalement could mean he was run through by a stake in a particular part of the body, most often the abdomen, for a period of time, and could possibly survive. But most often, impalement usually involved the very slow insertion of a wooden stake into various orifices. It was a slow and exceedingly painful death, and usually took place in public, which likely meant a crowd taunting and throwing things at the criminal. Strangulation was also a common form of punishment and could be done slowly or quickly depending on the offense, the offender, and perhaps a bribe paid to the executioner. This was done in a variety of ways, using a knotted rope to crush the trachea, allowing a victim's family member to do it with their bare hands, or even be put on a device that would quickly or slowly strangle the criminal by turning a crank or screw which tightened a rope or band of metal around the throat of an offender. Though death by cobra was shocking and was afflicted many more times than we can likely imagine. Though the Mughals were relatively efficient record keepers, not everything was committed to writing or has survived to the present day. Perhaps the most well-known, dramatic and documented form of punishment in the Mughal Empire was trampling by elephant. Actually, the elephants often did more than just trample criminals or political and military enemies, but more about that in a moment. In most cases of execution by elephant, the criminal was laid down, usually but not always tied up, and the elephant, which was specially trained for this job, was either ridden or led into what was sort of a public area, and the victim was crushed. This could happen in a variety of ways. If the judge, and many times this was the emperor himself, wanted to make a point, and you would think execution by elephant made its own point, he could order the rider to storm in and have the elephant suddenly and chaotically trample the criminal to death. Quick, but messy and terrifying. He might also order the elephant and its rider to go slowly, in which case slow pressure by one immensely powerful and heavy elephant foot might be applied. Imagine, if you can, a human head being popped like a grape under the slow pressure of a 5 to 11,000 pound animal. The elephant might also be instructed to lay down and roll over its victim over and over again until the body was essentially flat. In the early 1700s, when England began its great expansion into India, several English officials, traders and soldiers were present when victims were killed, and they too recorded what they saw with a mixture of fascination and disgust. But it was the 14th century Arab traveler and chronicler Ibn Battuta who recorded the many uses that elephants were put to in the criminal justice system, or for the entertainment of sociopathic emperors. Battuta recounted executions he witnessed personally, which included the elephant having large blades attached to its tusks and slashing a victim to pieces, a South Asian version of the infamous drawing and quartering, in which a victim was pulled apart by horses. Intrigued by the events of long ago and need more? Like and subscribe to A Day in History for more videos.